Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm just going to give it a minute or so for people to join, and then we'll get started with today's content. Hi there, welcome to today's webinar, taking a look at runtime identity security and the winning move against some frontier AI attacks. My name is Simon Moffatt. I'm founder and research analyst at the Cyberhut. This is in conjunction with Silverfort, and we've got two very special guests with me today, Rob and Roy from Silverfort. And we've got a fantastic discussion. I think we are all physically real. We're not quite converted into AI synthetic components just yet. So hopefully we're going to have a really great physical, actual discussion with humans, looking at the whole world of AI and the risks that it is bringing. But I guess before we get into today's content, a couple of little housekeeping tasks to start with. Obviously, we are on Zoom today. Everybody is centrally muted, but we do, of course, have the Q&A functionality available for you to use. You can find that within the panel section there, and do drop in your questions and comments as we go through today's content. And obviously, we will leave time at the end, but we'll try and answer the questions as they appear. So please use that functionality. This is obviously being recorded as well, so you will receive access to an on-demand copy of this to watch at your leisure, or of course share with your friends and colleagues after the event. So the world of AI, fascinating topic, hugely fast moving, and the implications, I guess, for productivity and security and safety and everything else are absolutely huge. So something we need to dive into today, looking at it really from that identity and security lens. I think it's a really fascinating and fast moving area of research. Who am I? My name is Simon Moffatt. I run an organization called the Cyberhut. I'm fortunate enough really to have been, I guess, within identity about 25 years. And obviously, over that time, there's a lot of things changed. Technologies, LDAP, on-premises, cloud, mobile, all that sort of stuff from a technical perspective. But I don't think anything has been as seismic as AI has been in the past probably two and a half years. And yes, we've been talking about machine learning and advancements in this area for a number of decades. But it's really been this last 2.5 years where we've seen huge, significant process and change really around what that can do and the impacts it is having to public sector, private sector, a whole host of different geographical areas as well. But obviously, of course, the big issue we're interested in is identity and security. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have two absolute experts from Silverfort join us. Roy and Rob, welcome. Maybe a quick introduction from yourself. Maybe start with you, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. So good to be with you, Simon, and thanks everyone for joining us. So I'm Rob Ainscough. I'm Chief Identity Security Advisor at Silverfort for EMEA. So I've been with the team about 18 months. Previously, I was head of IAM at Tesco in the UK. So I ran the IAM program there, built it up over about 10 years, probably one of the biggest IAM programs in Europe at the time. And now with the Silverfort team to talk about exciting subjects like this.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Roy.
Yeah, hey all. I'm Akerman, longtime government until 10 years ago, then became an identity security founder. Resonate, the company that I co-founded with Ori Amiga, was acquired by Silverfort. This is where I found myself working with Rob Ainscough, a former customer of Silverfort, and I'm leading the GTM Ninjas as you know in the advisory team and the incident response teams at Silverfort.
Absolutely thrilled to chat to you. The amount of knowledge you guys have from that sort of practitioner world, building software world, is definitely going to be squeezing some of that knowledge out over the next sort of 45 minutes or so. So thank you guys for starting up and having the conversation with me today. And today's agenda, really, a couple of things, really. It's sort of start off sort of the foundation, as always, really, to unpick a little bit around just where identity security is today. You know, why this has emerged is such a critical part of the sort of modern enterprise over the past 3 or 4 years, what that looks like, but really how it's been impacted by AI and by some of the sort of frontier models we've seen over the past, well, say 6 months, but certainly over the past year or so as well, and what impact that is really having to how we think about identity and identity security, and then wrap up really with some, I guess, some use cases and some ways that the likes of the Silverfort platform can help. And can we help? Can we sort of protect against some of these emerging, fast-moving attacks and what that sort of stuff looks like? And again, as always, I want to start a little bit about identity. Identity's been around a long time, as we know, 25, 30 years commercially, and it's lots of different flavors of identity now in 2026, not just sort of employee B2E focus, but there's a whole host of different things in there. But there's some real, I guess, strategic shifts which we've seen at the side. But, you know, first of all, identity is more important than it ever was 10, 15 years ago. It's absolutely the key component for business productivity, making sure you collaborate and share more and staff get the right access to the right systems. It's also helping things like supply chains and partner models. But without identity, your cyber investments, your data security, endpoint security, all of the sort of traditional pillars of security are reliant upon identity working effectively as well. And obviously, from a more external B2B and partner world, you have privacy concerns, you have revenue generation. So suddenly, identity's gone from being this, I guess, tactical and reactionary focus for staff is now suddenly strategic, and it has all of this, I guess, responsibility being applied to it, which I think is a huge opportunity. But of course, it has become, I would say, the number one attack vector. I don't think it's one of many. I think it is now the attack vector. And I guess maybe to bring you guys here, sort of anecdotally, I suppose, you know, we can easily go and Google and pick a few different breaches online now. But I guess, are we as an industry, are we sort of tuned into the fact now that if you look at any real significant data breach, be that it's sort of for cybercrime or for fraud or nation state style attack, if we sort of look in those in detail, it seems to be identity somewhere in there, whether it's credentials being stolen, whether it's privilege escalation. I guess as an industry, are we sort of livened up to the fact that identity is the number one attack vector now, or is that still in the shadows a little bit?
I think it's really interesting, Simon, because from my perspective, I think there's an understanding that that's the case, right? That it's overwhelmingly targeted by attackers. You know, you hear hackers don't break in, they log in all the time. I think that was first said about 7 years ago. So this isn't a new thing. This has been the way for a significant period of time. But I do think, to your previous side, practitioners are still adapting to what that exactly means and what the new demands are that that's placing on identity, where, you know, previously it might have come from a regulatory angle or a compliance angle, or a productivity and enablement angle, but now we're looking at it from a security angle. And I do think things are starting to click, but we're still understanding exactly what that means for us and what the new demands are. And I think we're going to cover some great stuff today about, you know, how that bar's even then raising when it comes to agentic and agentic threats.
I'll just add that we're
Yes.
seeing it strongly in the field. I mean, a lot of the teams, as Rob said, like realizations are coming in as things are coming to them. And we see a lot of APT groups actually building their attack infrastructure based on the identity fabric, not just to getting the initial access, but also to largely move, to own, to build their back channel. Everything is based on identity and access. And sometimes it's less noisy, less expensive just to do that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think there's as always, the bad guys always move faster because they have, you know, they don't have compliance to deal with, or HR teams or infrastructure. They can, you know, slightly more agile, of course, and they always will go for the weakest link in that security ecosystem. I think coupling with that as well, because identity now is so embedded, the rewards are so much higher, aren't they? Whether you suddenly integrate Slack to your Google or your Google to your third party, the way in is obviously becoming more vulnerable. But the sort of the rewards and the benefits of getting that right are just huge, I think. So it's almost this perfect storm of vulnerability and the bad guys being to exploit things. But of course, the rewards for doing so seem to be much higher. And I guess the big thing we've seen over the last 5-8 years, of course, is organizations invest in these pillars of identity. So maybe a bit of multi-factor authentication, a bit of privilege access over here, maybe a bit of onboarding and identity governance administration over there. But they're all disconnected. They're all from different vendors. They probably don't use standards. They probably don't cover all identities, all systems, all applications. So you suddenly end up with blind spots of visibility. You end up with a lack of standards, a lack of consistency around how identity data is being moved around. So we start to see these, I guess, explosion points or vulnerability points across a whole host of these traditional identity pillars. And it seems to me you can invest in some of these core identity technologies, but it does seem that something is missing. A lack of visibility, a lack of runtime analysis, an ability to look at permissions and policy across all systems, for example. I think these sorts of things, which you write them down, they seem obvious, but I don't think they are obvious, are they? I think there's still a bit of a lag around, I think, both the technology and how the technology is being deployed. I think, is that industry still catching up, I think?
I
Yeah, I
think that
mean, go on, Roy.
go
You go.
ahead. So just like from a viewpoint of a security person, like there's a imbalance between how the world is being built and connected versus how do we manage access and gluing all the things together to work, right? The latter is more static, right? Like more solid, like move in a little bit in big chunks and a little bit slow, right? We're trying to configure ourselves in order to work something out versus the later, like the way that we're building and gluing and patching and adding other things is much more dynamic and changes. And this is where we're losing the visibility. This is where we actually sometimes losing the right time to create the control decisions. Kind of like two different time zones of admin time, right? Of configuring and building and structuring and thinking about that, and runtime, right? Like making the decision now based on the context, all the context that you have to it now. I think that this is where the 5 points over here are actually falling.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I come back to a word you used there, Simon, of consistency. And I think my big realization as a practitioner was probably the most important challenge in dealing with identity threats is creating consistency. Now, that's underpinned by visibility, it's underpinned by understanding, and it's underpinned by trying to bring all of these bits of this thing we call identity together, right? Because it's not one thing, it's many. It's not just, Active Directory anymore. It's our cloud IDPs, it's our cloud platforms, it's our SaaS, it's agentic platforms now. Really everything is underpinned by that. But how do we make all of that work together as a team? How do we create consistency? Because for me, from a security perspective, creating that consistency and doing it, as Roy said, at runtime when it matters is really what moves the needle in terms of security.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And he's got consistency in different ways as well. It's consistency in security controls, but also things like consistency in making sure you've onboarded all of your identities, onboarded all of your systems, having consistent user experience as well. Certainly if you say, well, we're going to roll out multi-factor authentication, but you have 5 or 6 different multi-factor authentication components, if the user experience is all different, it's actually quite hard for the end user to figure out, am I being phished or not? Because the experience is different. Oh, well, in that system over there, I log in like this, but over there, it's a different login flow. And I'm not quite sure whether one's legitimate or not. And I think consistency is a really powerful thing. I think being able to deploy whatever controls you have to as many systems as possible is it's something you can control, I think, which is something you need to consider as well.
And that's where identity has been built up over kind of 25, 30 years of different technical capabilities, different standards, some of which we're happy with, some of which we're not, some of which are legacy now and difficult to protect. But it's how we deal with that complexity underlying, but present consistency to the user and consistency of adoption broadly. And that's something that we've really got to rise up above that legacy, rise up above those challenges of the inconsistencies underneath to present this clean and consistent runtime control. And that's something that I thought a lot about as a practitioner, right? It was about scale, it was about coverage. And that's really
Yeah.
important. But that needs the right technology to support you with that messy environment and, different users with different personas and different needs, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's it's very easy, I guess, for us to sit here and talk about modern things, and we are going to touch on AI in a second or two. But many organisations, they have to deal. I hate to use the word legacy. I think it's not the
I
right
don't
word
either.
sometimes. But traditional approaches or just technology choices you made in the past, which at the
Yeah,
time were the right thing to do, but obviously the world evolves. I think it's really important to realise that many organisations, they have to deal with all the technology, mergers, acquisitions,
right.
applications which cannot easily be deployed as a SaaS. You have compliance things as well. Compliance doesn't change that fast, so you've got lots of constraints to deal with. And I think this legacy approach to identity it's really now starting to creak, if you like, as we face some different challenges. And I should sort of wrap up this sort of section where you talk about how has the industry evolved here. And we talk about identity security now quite flippantly, I think, in many terms. But it's really important to realise that it isn't just one or two controls within identity governance administration, or just deploying a bit more PAM or a bit more passwordless or passkeys. They're all part of the picture, but it's really important to think about security holistically. So it's going end to end across your entire identity life cycles, but also I think as well, we've got here the sort of identity attack life cycle, and the bad guys are doing bad stuff. You look at things like MITRE ATT&CK is their sort of end-to-end framework. How do you protect across all of those different components there, all of the TTPs, and looking at the identity data, yes, ghost accounts, access permissions, and all of that best practice, but also looking at, well, okay, what happens during authentication? What happens during authentication bypass? What happens after you've issued a session or a token or a SAML assertion or whatever? What's happening downstream? So I just want to sort of over amplify this, and there's bad stuff happening, and you want to detect the bad stuff, but hopefully we try and get to a position where you can detect before the bad stuff is completed, and you're sort of moving sort of left of the boom there, as they say, and trying to detect stuff early, remediate, recover. And again, is this well understood? From your perspective, is this now, or is this a few years ago, or organizations still trying to catch up with this?
I
Well,
think,
maybe the security side, I mean, and then you can reflect back on the true things that are happening in the infrastructural side, although we both do the same, like both things. Unfortunately, this is what most of the organizations today have like in mind and were built to, right? Like, and sometimes it's contradict or counterintuitive. So like they're waiting literally for something bad to happen, okay, or to realize that something bad is happening. We're calling this detection, which is the early points of realization, and then trying to fix it. It's like letting a bullet get into the barrel, getting shot, like shoot this bullet by the bad guys, and then running and trying to hide yourself or like fix the problem or whatever. Uh, and you can see this by the imbalance that you have between IAM and infra teams and security sometimes and other things. So this was the way to build security infrastructure when attack was slow, when attack was not multidimensional, when attack progressed over time. So those time gaps, right, allowed us to actually block most of the things after we detected them if we responded much faster. But as you said, Simon, as attacks became much more faster and complex and multidimensional and simultaneous, by the end of the day, if you will not intervene in the initial stages, right, of the attempts, of the, I don't know, failed logins, of the MFA bypass, and will not mislead or block or apply other decisions of limited access or whatever, if you're not sure, you didn't detect yet, right? It's a weak signal, but you're starting to protect from them. If we will not be there, I mean, and we already feel that. So we will respond too late.
Mm-hmm.
So going left, I like it. For me, it's kind of like going in depth, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
speaking about identity as an infrastructure level, and security is something that comes above after the realization that something bad could happen or already happened.
Mm.
That's
And
good. That's good to know. Go on,
I
Paul.
think just from a kind of practitioner perspective, and I look at this and some of the threats we're seeing, from AI-enabled attacks and the speed that that brings, as we've talked about, I think there are some real misconceptions. So I think about IGA, and um, I think IGA is a great thing to do in an important discipline. The reality, though, is in an attack scenario, particularly a rapid attack, um, it's really not going to help you, right? It's operating on a different plane. It's in admin time. It might make things less bad by narrowing blast radius through privilege management and good hygiene around that. But really, it's a bit of a misconception that that will really, really help you when it matters. And I really think about this in terms of how we build identity resilience. And I think that word's a little bit pigeonholed to mean recovery when everything's gone wrong. But really, it's kind of through the life cycle how we're able to, as Roy says, kind of shift left into proactive, how we're able to take control of that, build defense in depth, protect what matters to our business through identity controls, and really build robustness into identity and the ability to kind of bend but not break under duress,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's a really important concept that's really kind of under talked about in the industry, but I think is probably the most important thing. But really, IGA might help you with a bit of that in terms of right sizing your attack surface, for example, but it's not going to kind of give you everything you need there. And that's where we talk about shifting left and runtime and the kind of speed of response and getting it early being very, very important because, if attack chains start, it's very difficult to get control of them once they start. So, resilience throughout is so important in identity these days.
I think that's really, really important. Really true. I think like bend that breaks good. I think it is about adapting and understanding and recovering, responding, and not just allow, deny, and having to start from scratch. It is being adaptive. I think what the bad guys are
Right.
continually
Exactly.
doing, and that sort of segues. That sort of foundational, the 101 there, identity security, but it segues into this AI stuff. And clearly not all AI is the same, but obviously the last 6 months or so, there's been some really interesting aspects in some of these frontier models that I guess as a byproduct of how they've been constructed have become very good at cybersecurity vulnerability identification. I think 6 months ago, this sort of it's become more aware perhaps, but I think that it's almost been this sort of watershed moment, I think, where conceptually this concept of, well, we've looked at vulnerability management in the past and it was all about, well, we'll patch faster and this sort of thing. It's like, well, actually we're not just talking about vulnerabilities in the sense of 0 days, and a lot of that you can't do anything about until a vendor or a supplier provides a patch anyway. So you've got all of these, I think, all is quite linear and quite manual understanding of identity and of security, I should say. But I think the last few months around the likes of Mythos and Glasswing, and just looking at how we can deconstruct both vulnerability identification and patching, yes, that's one part. But I think it's really just opened the conversation much more around context, chaining vulnerabilities together, looking at real exploit development, which isn't just about one sort of little step into a system because it's not patched. So I guess all the things we've been talking about 15 minutes, are they redundant now? Is the likes of sort of AI-led vulnerability exploitation, is that just going to be this huge hose pipe that destroys that vision? Or can we use this runtime world to at least fight back a little bit?
Roy, you're muted.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is so 2020, kind of like things you're muted. I don't believe they're redundant. I think that they're becoming a little bit secondary, right?
Mhm.
Because you need to have instant response or instant decisions in order to beat the AI weaponized technologies that making everything much more faster, right? So yes, do you need to patch code? Of course you have to, right? But can you do this right now with a 15,000 vulnerabilities or potential vulnerabilities that you've discovered with your defensive AI, I mean, this will take forever, right? Can you improve detections to be much more accurate and early? Yes, you probably can, but can you improve the instinct or the reflex of detection and response to be much faster, even faster than AI or anything else? That there's Mythos-like models that fixing you. No, you can't, right? You need to make sure that you're removing as much as possible of the response to before realization of an attack. So I think that security still have tons of work, not to even mention discovering all those chains of trust or possible attack paths that could be there, and then trying to fix them, harden them, maybe even spreading some landmines so that they will enhance the early detection. But by the end of the day, you need to bring the decision making, let's call it like response area, much more to the infrastructure level, much more left. And I think that I read this article and I read many more. All the organizations that I spoke with started with focusing on patching and then realized that
Yeah.
those codes, Mythos and others, and I can share a little bit more from the field, are actually preferring to move to log in and to use the identity infrastructure in order to achieve their goals. And I think that like to sum up, this is what it's a big opportunity for identity leaders. It's a big opportunity to become much more stronger part of the security fabric,
Mm-hmm.
and go beyond the enablement of like the basic enablement of the business, right?
Do you think, though, I mean, just as a quick sort of side question here, the likes of this sort of type of technology, or just using LLMs in general to look and hunt for vulnerabilities, does
Right.
it, ironically, in my head, I'm thinking, does it actually amplify the use of sort of vibe coders and citizen coders who can go and just knock something out quickly because they think, oh, well, I don't really care if it's insecure because I know at some point we'll just use a vulnerability scanner and that will automatically or auto magically identify all of the weaknesses. Is that a potential pattern or more like a risk we sort of fall into in the sense of the AI will fix this for us? Is that a real risk? Do you think?
Well, I'll be a little bit blunt here, and I think that that will be a retro kind of like realizations or like a retro justification that organization will say, because I think that vibe coding is there big time. And you can see this all over because it's practical, because it's solving problems already, because it makes us be better and faster with the price of mistakes. I mean, I don't want to name the companies that just published how agents rip their databases, like make them down, Fortune 50 companies. But to your questions, yes, I think that it's so fast and so like in high quality that the model can compromise us that we should have to assume a breach. If we have to assume a breach, to operate, we can accept what you've just suggested, right? Go with it a little bit soft on deploying software and building
Mm.
another security infrastructure that will deal with the consequences in real time.
Mm. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
interesting.
I think it's just kind of bringing it together. I think with Mythos, especially, the headline has been so much about software vulnerabilities, and it's a very narrow take on the capabilities of these frontier models, particularly when it comes to identity. And I think, with the potential kind of democratization of the ability to give it a go, right, using AI, the chance of footholds being established is much, much higher than ever before, whether that's through vulnerabilities in software or identity. And then we really have to think differently about identity and what it's there for, as we said, about a core security control, and really start to treat and really truly treat the interior of our companies the same as we treat an internet facing system, right? And
Mm.
for me, that's the first kind of key thing. We have to assume breach and treat everything like it's external and protect it to the same level. And that means doing it at runtime so that we can be there when it matters in the time we need to.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think, if we talk about the sort of typical vulnerabilities, not just in identity, but I think within security and within the concepts, within sort of network parameterization, the sort of zero trust stuff from a decade ago, it's like, yeah, we understand it. And it's like, well, you sort of say that, but ultimately, I think that this sort of AI led world, and I don't just mean mythos here, but I think the AI adoption sort of hockey stick curve there is so rapid and so fast. It's amplifying a lot of the existing lack of fitness, should we say, within the technology landscape, and obviously some common identity vulnerabilities in there, but there's a whole host of others around how we classify data, how we deploy SASE networks, and lots of other things. And it's like those vulnerabilities are often acknowledged in the sense of that the risk is acknowledged in the sense of, yeah, we know that, but the chances of it being exploited are low. Well, I think what's actually happening now is all the stuff here around maybe excess permissions, and you multiply that with NHIs that you haven't discovered, and they've got static credentials and long-lived credentials, and then multiply that around. You deploy an agent attached to a member of staff who's left, and the agent has a huge whole host of unmonitored access. It's like it's a cascade of risk here, and it's like from an AI perspective, when you have agents that are self-optimizing, or you have shadow AI, which is integrating with core data assets, it's almost like these vulnerabilities. We talk about them constantly, but it's almost now as if like actually it's only now they're really going to get exploited. I think there's the acceleration of the exploitation, but I think it's the chaining effect as well, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, I think they're both important. I mean, generally it's a reassessment of risk, right? There's companies where they said, I know all of my non-human accounts are unprotected and I've signed that risk off. Right. Maybe at some point that was okay. I'm not sure it was, but maybe it was okay. Certainly the risk reassessment on that is significant, and the potential for these vulnerabilities, this technical debt, whatever you want to call it in terms of identity, to now be chained and exploited is really significant. And a lot of this comes from what we talked about at the start, IGA operating at admin time. We all know things like reviews aren't particularly effective in achieving things like least privilege that's going to narrow the attack surface. We know there's problems in account lifecycle management, particularly for non-humans. We know that privileged access management programs often are very, very narrow and only target a subset of the accounts that are out there, leaving a surface that's vulnerable. And really, these things have built up over a number of years due to either difficulties of applying technology or different drivers driving what you're actually doing and what you're leaving behind. But really, with that reassessment of risk through the potential of AI to exploit these, it's significant, and we've got to, it's really raising the bar. It's really raising the bar, and that consistency is really important now.
I would just add, and I totally agree with what you said, Rob, is that even the risk measuring process became something that is influenced by real-time discoveries beyond, by the way, if a specific thing is malicious or not. A lot of organizations realizing that those chains of trust, this access path is existing only in the second that, a request is coming to pivot from one place to another. Right? We were overwhelmed when we saw a lot of moves, or literally literal moves from humans to non-human, and then to another non-human, and then to a human, and then to the resource that we're seek to get access to. But now with AI agents and with the non-deterministic that are changing way that they're changing themselves and building capabilities and connecting things, it's really hard to say in advance what's the overall risk that you have in all of those points, right? You're realizing this in real time, and then you need to adjust in real time. And that complexity, it's just like growing as AI agents are building our environments, right? We spoke about vibe coding, but my cloud is building resources in my cloud. It's connecting them. It's part of the CI/CD process, right? So it's providing new identities, like bringing them to life and things like that. So yeah, like looking on this as chains of trust as being built over time or being built instantly in an ephemeral way, and then playing the risk game around them. I think this is where we are.
Yeah, you really some interesting points. So, I think that leveraging agents or an AI way of developing stuff is it's just adding to the complexity, isn't it? If you talk about the broad technological environment for the modern enterprise, they've got a lot of stuff, right? They've got software, they have data, they have supply chains, they have partners, visibility is a nightmare. And suddenly it's almost a case of, right, well, we can vibe code, or maybe you can just whatever sign up to a SaaS application and that will
Yeah.
outsource that for me. But you can get to a level of complexity really, really, really rapidly. And we've done loads of stuff at the side, but testing different things and building things. You can build things really fast. It's like, I have no idea how that works. I've got no, I guess, auditability and understanding the linkages, the libraries, all that sort of stuff. And it's, again, it amplifies this I guess, risk. It's a shadow risk. Maybe that's a new term we need. But it's all the shadow risk which is existing because AI is, I guess, it's obfuscating some of those concerns. And I guess I want to sort of wrap up here. What can we do about this stuff? Obviously, we know identity is becoming more important. We know it has tentacles now into more systems, more identity types. We have more integrations from an application and a network data and sort of endpoint security world. And we're sort of saying, well, we've got these existing vulnerabilities within the identity world and in the tech world, and this AI stuff is, yes, it's amplifying vulnerability identification, but it's exploiting stuff. Can we fight back? Can we do something here? And this is where I want to sort of talk a little bit about what are the specific things we are going to be needing to look for and attempt to fix. And there's a couple here which I think are really important. One is touched on this a little bit, which is that chaining aspect. And I think if you look at that and you then look at this simultaneous attack path thing, it seems like it's like a multifaceted defensive problem here. You're going to have not just individual systems which need patching and may need one or two security controls around, I don't know, maybe session binding or access permissions, but it's like you add them all together, and it's like that's a very different sort of mindset there ultimately. And I just want to sort of introduce this runtime aspect around, can we start to look and identify and start to do something different? Is it possible?
It is. I think that I mean, we all need to work toward a goal. So, like, I think that if the goal is to make our identities and our infrastructure resilient against the incoming AI weaponized threats or that are already here, there's the become ready. And exactly like Rob said, like, be ready to be bent or pressed and not being break, like building the resilience, which is, and I really like the way that you dissected it here. Have a pre-analysis of the vulnerability chaining or the misconfigurations chains that can be out there, right? And try to fix or mitigate or compensate or monitor and respond fast when something bad is happening. The misconfig reduction, I think that we don't really have the privilege yet to say, yes, we'll manage a dashboard and we'll treat only the criticals, because we learned that the models can actually chain a lot of weak misconfigurations into a scattered but powerful aggregated privileged I don't know, super identity that will chain them and then do whatever they need. So I believe that this part is super important. But again, it should be with a mind of it's not discrete, it's not siloed, it's part of a greater motion that an attacker will run on us. And this is where prioritization needs to be changed and risk should be measured in a different way. But I believe that the third point is something that everybody should leave the discussion with today, which is, it's a one question. Can I or am I wrapping all the access paths of my organizations, regarding by which identity? It can be an agent, a person, an HI, it's going to be an on-prem technology, it's going to be a super quantic technology, whatever it is. Am I wrapping this in a security control that can be relevant instantly and on the right, point in time to actually stop or to limit or to impact access? And can, it's a world where sessions are not existing anymore, right? You need to continuously validate what happens. So can I operate them at once? That's the simultaneous game, right? The more context that you can bring from other tools, that's great. The more pre-administrative work that you can do before that, like you said, the two other pillars, that's great. But to be ready for the next war or like to the existing kind of like battles that we have, that question should be answered. And I think should wrap every evolution of the infrastructure that we're building.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just to extend on that, I think identity security, coming back to the consistency point, is not about being great selectively. It's about being really good when it matters widely. That's really the core of this because we can't really what we're moving beyond is this tier zero thinking. We're like, I've protected tier zero, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Right? That leaves an awful lot of space for things to happen and be changed and something meaningful for your business to occur outside of that. And I think we're rapidly exiting that world where that's a viable strategy. And it really is about, as Roy said, how do we act when it matters with context, with really, really high coverage. Even if previously we've kind of assessed the risk of that as low, we can't really do that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's some really interesting things, isn't it? Again, the mindset has to change, doesn't it? The
Right.
defensive and both the infrastructure design approach has to change, but also the defensive mindset around look, you can't just, as you say, protect the crown jewels, or well, we've got MFA on our administrators, so we're fine. It's like look at things you can control. I think that's a really interesting one. You can't really control what the attackers are doing, essentially, but you can control your coverage, you can control your visibility, you can control your how you measure risk, all those things. They're levers that, as an organizational sort of security designer, you can influence, you can make a difference there, and that I think it is about introducing coverage across as many systems as possible. Back to the consistency thing, looking at access paths and not just particular systems and silos. You're identifying where your high risk assets are, what can access them. Is it people? Is it NHI? Is it agents? Not just saying, well, we've got this directory over here, and that's okay, because they might not be coming through there. It could be third parties. It could be two apps from a third party or whatever. So again, it's identifying the high risk and, as you said, looking at access paths in there. Well, I really want to sort of wrap up and amplify this concept of resilience and some of the work you guys are on playbooks and defining what identity resilience and sort of model resilience, I suppose, is. And some interesting things, again, we mentioned a little bit about being proactive in there as well. I think that's quite a strategic shift, I think. We talked a little bit about, well, we need to detect things or we check what's in the logs. And if it's in the logs, it's probably already happened and completed, and the bad guys have disappeared and exfilled your data there. So is this a real? Is it like an incremental innovation, this sort of playbook thing, or is your concept more? Is it more revolutionary? I suppose.
I think kind of the core of what's on this slide, and there is quite a lot. It's not particularly kind of novel, right? It's not new. I think what we are, as an industry is really waking up to the importance of runtime, right? As Silverfort, we've been doing that for a lot of years, and that's really in the DNA of the company. But really, I feel like that's really starting to get understood in terms of its power right now when we face into these new threats. And when we're talking about some of these, they're not things that you know maybe we didn't know. We knew static credentials, unprotected credentials are a risk. But this is making us reassess that risk and say, hey, the bar has raised and we need to deal with that risk at runtime. I think some of the resilience thinking, the big red button thinking we call it, right? What if my primary control fails? What if my secondary control fails? How am I going to protect my business? And what's identity's role in that? Because identity does have a role in that. It's not just about disabling accounts and resetting credentials. It's about using identity proactively to limit harm. So there aren't like particularly kind of new ideas in cybersecurity terms, but maybe they are new to identity practitioners as we move more into this identity security world. But
Mm.
really, it's about that. It's about consistency. It's about defense in depth. And it's about kind of assuming breach, assuming failure. And how am I going to limit harm? How am I going to protect my business to build that resilience? I know, Roy, you'll have a lot to add on this one.
As a matter of fact, I really like the way that you framed it, like using identity dynamically in order to reduce damage or like make sure that even if that something started to happen, like the do no harm things will kick in. I mean, it's runtime. We're speaking about the dynamicy. By the end of the day, it's again like going through enablement and stability of like the business to protecting the business. And I think that, it's yet to be defined how the new rollout of security and IAM teams will look like and our organizations will look like. Uh, but human processes cannot mitigate on that time
Mm.
gap between the control like operations, which is being done by an IAM, and the I don't know, security realization. Let's call it like that, like the detection moment. Um,
Mm.
that's the point. And I think that risk awareness or like a mutual risk perception is the thing that will connect them both. And that's one. I think that, Rob, we've discussed a lot, and as a matter of fact, when organizations reached out to Silverfort to actually solve for Mythos-like attacks, and maybe again for the people in this session, uh, attackers are already using LLMs in order to not just build the best phishing landing page in the world, but more than that, they're using it in order to operate their attacks already, right? We know this for a year now, and recent Anthropic's navigation documents show that. And the idea is that, yes, if we realize that we're still building, we're not ready for runtime, we're in the process, we're our legacy systems, right? Don't forget your on-prem systems because the models are looking into them. But we're
Mm.
building something right now and we're figuring out a process. We need a big red button, right? We need, and Rob, I'm stealing some of your terminology, right? To act identity in a dynamic way as a drawbridge and to make sure that we can take the entire organization fabric into a position then if you're under attack, still the system is resilient in that way that it will not be a fully lockdown, but the crown jewels, the core business logic and processes will still get running. And basically, it's an identity play, right? Like who will operate, who will not, who will access, who will not, what will still go up. That's the big red button, right? Number two over here. And like states are running war drills and like dry, I don't know, tabletops or whatever. These are critical business questions. These are critical access questions that should be asked, and we need to build a reciprocal identity play, right, or dynamicy for that. Rob, do you want to take number three, or shall I? I mean, up to you.
I think you're the king of
You're on a
detection.
roll, Roy, on a roll.
Ken. So I know that deception is something that the security world has flirted with a long time, but it's not a matured market. So or yet, maybe it's the big chance for you guys who are building those programs. There's a few things that we can do today in order to earn time and to enhance detections, even turning early signals into I don't want to say good enough detection because I believe that we don't have time for this, but like maybe extend the magnitude of a signal of something better is starting to happen, right? And this is where we can use simple honey tokens, right? I'm not speaking about honeypots or other things, the honey tokens, or take the vulnerable parts of the systems that we have that we cannot patch, right? With the legacy systems and others that will take time to play with and building very sensitive controls around them. And once you know that those controls are triggered or anything else, it's kind of like an enhanced detection. You know that, I mean, you're not in red alert, but you're in somewhere like that is like sometime that is not, that critical, but yet to be critical, right? And then you can play with, again, number two over here, being ready to do something greater and better. I mean, us human, we're still smarter or like you can cognize and you can realize better than the agents. Oh my god, now I'll be attacked by a swarm of agents after this call, but we can still trick them. We can still make
Mhm.
assumptions that they will go to the least resistance like approach, and we can play with that. So that's number four, and that's how do we earn time, how do we mislead a little bit in order to move to the def con stage or to the red button.
Yeah,
It's,
no.
go on
I
there, sorry.
think kind of just a last thought from me. Like, I think in terms of measuring success and in terms of knowing that you're successful with this kind of an approach, you really do have to test yourself. You really do have to, as far as possible, continuously test your posture, test where you're at in terms of those chains of trust and attack chains that could be exploited, and test your defenses and make sure they're working right. This identity kind of controls and response to this threat that we're seeing from Agentic is really, really important to verify that our controls are effective. This is going to be front and center, as we've already said, detect and respond is kind of narrowing in the time that
Mm,
it's going to have to be effective. So really, really do take a testing first approach, verify your defenses and be proactive.
mm. Again, it's back to that proactive thing, isn't it? It's been trying to be ahead of the bad guys. I think
Right,
that's a real, I
right.
think, more of a strategic
That's
change,
it.
isn't it, to what we've been used to, where we put
Exactly.
some controls and then we assume they're going to probably break if we're maybe mature in our thinking. And then, as I say, looking at the logs, you're looking at your Splunk, looking at your activity stuff, and it's like, well, it's already happened there, and I think it's being more proactive and assuming fake, assuming breach, assuming credentials aren't what they say they are. I think it's very much a different mindset, I think. So, just wrapping this up now is the time. If you have any questions in the audience, please ping them through. I guess I've got a couple of questions that have just sort of sprung to me here. I mean, I guess what we're talking about is this is a complicated technological change that we're all part of now. It's not like it's going to happen soon. This, AI is here. It's live. It's being used. It's doing some amazing, huge productivity benefits there. It seems to me, perhaps, is it only AI that can protect AI? And by that I mean, some of the things we're talking about, chaining, simultaneous attack paths, all of that real subtle complexity and almost the optimization of the vulnerability exploitation angle. Does that sound like humans can we keep up? And by that I mean not necessarily manually humans, but I mean things like standards and compliance and OWASP and whatever it is, whatever security sort of lingua franca we use. Or is it a case of it's only going to be AI that can keep up and almost sort of robot wars, the AI defender against the AI attacker? Um, where does it all end, I guess?
I
Great question.
we still have place in this world after all. And the word and of course that the word only is always like is building an opportunity to looking at things differently. I think that when it comes to discovering our existing problems, to see those hard to recognize chains of trust or like attacks, things like that, in order to work in scale, we definitely need AI to work in our favor, right?
Mm,
And we spoke about that, but I think that our opportunities as again the next generation leaders is to build the things right, right?
mm,
And not to rely that we can detect and then respond and fix the problem and whatever, or being willing to pay the penalty or the disaster cost of a breach, but building things in a way that will assume a breach, right? And then, sorry for throwing things to the air right now, but building a loop of depth for agents that will try to attack it, or like there's a way that we can actually build, not even rebuild, but build the new things in a way that will deal with those as those assumptions. So I hope that it's not too much futuristic answer to your question, but
I think
this
the
is where
future. I think the future is rapidly emerging, isn't it? I think also the other cliche is the future's here. It's just not evenly distributed. So I think we
yeah.
have to start thinking about tomorrow now, and it's yesterday was the best time to plant a tree and all that sort of stuff. I think we have to start thinking now about the future approach, and nobody quite knows what that looks like. But yeah, I agree. I think it is looking at leveraging AI in a positive way, building things secure by design. I guess building security built in from the
Right.
offset. I guess as we wrap up here, I guess any sort of quick takeaways. I guess sort of what our listeners could sort of maybe do now or do next as part of their sort of journey to look at this sort of stuff.
I mean, for me, I think as we think about these agentic threats and the speed with which they can exploit identity and get to, meaningful outcomes, and we've seen that, firsthand as a company and worked alongside Glasswing to harden. But I think the fundamental is runtime is the key, right? IGA isn't going to be quick enough. Detect and respond isn't going to be quick enough. We really need to think about runtime controls with high coverage, human, non-human, so that we can really take control and be proactive in what we're doing here. That is an effective recipe in terms of this problem, and
Mm,
it's a great starting point. So, if for example, you've got privileged access that's unprotected, if you know you've got service accounts going unprotected today, it's a great place to start because they are low-hanging fruit when it comes to this threat. So really trying to build that consistent baseline of runtime protection is probably the most important thing you can start with today.
Very good. Roy, any final thoughts? You're on mute. AI has muted you.
That's it. I'm done. It's not me anymore. I think that, like our IAM leaders or identity leaders should actually bring themselves in to those discussions that are happening in the boardroom, in this like in the CISO office, right? I'm seeing this a lot. Like organizations are calling us. They're the ones that have access to Mythos are actually running it and then realizing where the problem are. And the others are just trying to use other models in order to do that. But sometimes identity people are not in this discussion, or that they're only in the part of, okay, go and fix and mitigate that. So I would just like say, bring yourself into the real time-ish kind of like type of discussions and gradually own it without the security people even realizing that you're doing this. That's my offer.
That's good. That's good. That's subliminal advice. That's perfectly good. I think it's perfectly legitimate advice there. Gentlemen, thank you for sharing your words of wisdom. I think let's hang on Roy's words there, and we still have a bit of value to give just yet as physical human people for the time being, at least. Who knows as the years go by, but. Thank you for sharing your words with us. This is absolutely fascinating area. I think it's only going to continue to become a bigger problem. We do have to think differently, A, about identity security, but B, about, as you said, the runtime inline ways of looking at what agents and HIs, people are actually getting access to, what they're doing, why they're doing it, which I think is only going to get bigger. I do think it's also highly evolving, moving very rapidly, as we all know. So it'd be interesting to maybe sit down in 12 months' time to see, are some of these predictions right? And are we going to be in an AI robot wars for the immediate future? So, Rob, Roy, thank you for taking some time out and chatting. Thank you to our audience for listening. There's been a couple of questions. Yes, the slides will be made available and the recording of this will obviously be made available as well. So thank you for listening and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.